Hey, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to our Wild Digital Boom Conference 2021. Thank you, MC, for having the floor to us. Really excited to be on this panel. As introduced, I've got the fantastic Mimi Wu and Henry Cox from Myanmar Recycles, along with James Tan from the very distinguished and well-known Quest Ventures. So this topic is one that's very personal to me, especially, and I think to all the panelists over here. You know, the pandemic has definitely highlighted the various different social and environmental issues that we're having, right? And as we approach 2030, which is our target to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, how are we getting there? How are we going to leverage of technology to accelerate our path towards that? We've seen some fantastic advancements in tech, especially in the renewable energy space, where cost has dropped close to 80%, especially for solar and wind. We've seen how plastic recycling used to only be very industrial scale, but now we've seen it becoming a lot more accessible, and even we've seen smaller community-led recycling initiatives powered by open source technology. So this session, we have a diverse bunch of perspectives, and I'm quite happy to jump into it right away. So without further ado, let's start with Henry, and maybe Henry, you could give us a bit of insights into the work, the amazing work that you do at Myanmar Recycles, and also, buddy, maybe how are you guys doing personally with the situation currently in Myanmar?
Sure thing. Thanks, Rashvin. Mingalaba. My name's Henry from Myanmar Recycles. I'm the COO. Just a quick background on we are a mechanical recycler of plastic film. And when we say plastic film, that's thin plastic that you think of things like shopping bags, garbage bags, grocery bags. So we've started a business which targets plastic film, and we're growing in our collection efforts across the country. Just a lot of people might be thinking about the situation here in Myanmar at the moment. We're safe. There's lots of plastic out there. The pandemic has actually increased that, and it's made it a little bit more visual, I think, for everyone to see. So, you know, it's a never-going battle for us to continually get in this feedstock. And what is feedstock for us is sometimes considered waste. And you know, we're doing our best to mitigate that and to encourage collection schemes around the country. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and what we do, and excited to be here today.
Thank you, Henry. Can we jump over to you, James, about the work you do at Quest Ventures? And
okay, very good afternoon, everyone. Quest Ventures is a venture capital fund focused on early stage investments in startups that have scalability and replicability in large communities. Based on many metrics, both independent and internal, I believe we are one of the top venture capital funds in Asia. We believe that delivering value in today's world includes consideration of the environmental, social, and governance aspects, which is the very reason why we are on this panel today. We know that reducing inequalities mean financial inclusion, healthcare, environmental sustainability, and education and food for all. Asia's rapid but really uneven development are challenges that we are addressing with what we hope is a good combination of capital and technology. More important than what we do as investment funds are actually what startups are doing. So we ultimately back fantastic founders working on game-changing ideas. So I'm looking forward to what Mimi and Henry have to say about plastics and what Rashvin yourself has to say about social enterprises.
oh, thank you, James. Yeah, it's very kind. We will definitely jump into that. And I guess we have Mimi. So Mimi, could you just share with us from a larger global perspective, right? What is the size and scale of the problem we are facing with regards to plastic waste? And what is humanity's collective responsibility in rising above this?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. So the global plastic films market is growing at about 6% compounded annual growth rate, and it's expected to reach a value of nearly $90 billion by 2023. Packaging itself is one of the fastest growing end-use markets of plastics. And what does this mean exactly? You know, most plastics are only used for a few minutes before being thrown away. Unfortunately, plastic doesn't decompose for hundreds of years. And it's estimated that by 2050, we're going to have more plastic than fish in the oceans. So we're in a global plastic pollution crisis right now, and it's something that we've been facing for decades, actually. It's such an important thing to tackle because we really only have one home, it's planet Earth. And unfortunately, there's nowhere on Earth that has escaped plastic waste. So millions of animals are killed every year, which is disrupting our global ecosystem and our food chains. Humans are eating about 5 grams of microplastic every week, which is the size of a credit card. And new plastic production and plastic waste is really exacerbating climate change. And it's leading to natural disasters that are becoming a lot more frequent and much more intense. And it's costing record amounts year after year. In Myanmar itself, almost 80 million plastic bags are thrown away each day. And Henry had alluded to this. He said, plastic pollution is such a visual problem here in Myanmar. The waste management systems here aren't as efficient, and outside of big cities, waste management is practically non-existent. And that's not just for Myanmar, that's a lot of other countries in the region as well. Southeast Asia is the largest region, and it's the region with the largest amount of plastic leakage. So what happens is that there's a lot of litter on the land going into riverways, and it's also being openly burned. And plastic pollution ends up being not only an environmental blight, but a really devastating global health problem too.
Thank you, Mimi. I think you're right to point out that Southeast Asia does have a particular plastic problem. And I think if you remember, I think maybe 2 years ago, we were also having issues with various different countries, developed countries, dumping their plastics in the region. And I'm glad that's being tackled, but I don't know if it's been tackled 100%. So just move. Yeah. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No. Go ahead.
No worries. So just moving on, right? So let's just take a larger view of what's happening with the pandemic, of course, which we cannot avoid. So it's, as we all know, and as an entrepreneur myself, we've all faced multiple different disruptions to our business. And whilst, when you have a healthcare crisis happening, environment efforts take a step down or took a notch down because the social impact or the social needs were the ones highlighted the most. And, a year on, how do you see this evolving, right? And what does this mean for your business? And what does it mean for the investments, maybe for you, James? And what are the shifts that you've seen in your business from your operations perspective, or even from your customers or the users? Maybe Mimi, you could take this first.
Sure, yeah. The pandemic has certainly put us in a position where we need to prioritize our financial sustainability and the ability to weather this storm. And we did that by diversifying our products and expanding our supply chain. And while it was always our plan to get as close to the first waste generator as possible and away from end-of-life landfill, which is where we did a lot of our collection, and the pandemic really sped up that timeline to be able to get closer to the first waste generator. Because in Yangon, for example, only 50% of waste is actually making it to the landfill. That other 50% is just being leaked into the environment. So we'd love to be able to capture that. And we've also been establishing stronger supply chain networks, which we're growing and which we're fundraising to also continue growing. And as I mentioned, we also added on new products, which really helped us kind of weather the 2020 pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Mimi. And how about you, James? Looking at the different investments that you made, how has the pandemic changed that?
A year on, I think we have fully adapted to the new normal. We are fully comfortable making investment decisions virtually and working through our regional networks of friends and partners for due diligence and any other investment work. With respect to the question you asked about sustainability, it is an important factor in the investments that we make. We make very considered choices, and in cases where there are two similar deals, with one clearly having measurable sustainable outcomes and the other having no sustainable outcomes, you can be sure that Quest will take the one with sustainable outcomes. Plastic leakage causes long-term impact, and as Mimi pointed out, this region that we are in is the world's largest offender, and it takes many coming together to solve, and just happy that we are part of the solution.
Thank you, James. So Henry, maybe we could jump to you in this. And as we spoke about technology and how important is it to accelerate the issues we're facing, right? How has Myanmar Recycled used technology in its operations? And I guess going forward, how do you see technology playing a role in your operations?
Well, the core basis of what we do is mechanical recycling, and there is some technology involved in that, but that's not really where we can accelerate. What we do at the moment and what we plan to do in future is really about gathering data and correct data from the market. So encouraging suppliers to record weights, for example, and transmit that, and taking the vagary out of dealing with a commodity, whether it's a good quality or bad quality or how much you have. So that's what we really focus on at the moment. And for us, but one of the big challenges is not just implementing the technology, but training the people how to use it properly. So we've tended to take a more simple solutions to the way we approach the use of technology. But for us, it's really about coordinating our supply, getting the data correct, and then coming up with supply plans on the back of that data to make collection them as efficient as possible. So that's how we do that, and we'd really like to extend that to a sort of national network going forward. We think that there will be platforms that we can use in this regard that are more tailored to waste trading and recycling. But at the moment, we're keeping it pretty simple.
Oh, that's brilliant, Henry, because I love the fact that you're focusing on the data part of it and, understanding where is the source of the problem, how are the users treating it, and, that really allows you to pinpoint your efforts, I imagine.
Exactly. I mean, in these developing markets, things like waste trading is quite often really inefficient. And so if you can overcome some of those inefficiencies just by getting that data in, and connecting the dots, so to speak, then you can save a lot of money, and you can actually encourage recycling because you're getting it to our facility in a much more economical way. And that's really, the more we can do that, the more we can recycle, and really the better off the environment is for that to occur.
Thank you, Henry. So just jumping back to you, James, and this is also very linked to a question the audience is asking. So I guess you get to play a larger ecosystem role, right? You get to see the different. You've invested in over 90 tech-driven companies across 150 cities, I understand. And I would like to understand, like, what are some of the key investments you've made in companies that are tackling environment sustainability? So maybe we can hear about those companies as well, and what attracted you to them, right? And the question from the audience is actually, what's the long-term value of VCs in investing in impact-driven startups beyond the obvious social good? So I guess this is all kind of related.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So we have invested in more than 90 plus companies, and as much as the impact-focused startups are clearly in the impact of sustainability space, I'm actually very happy that many of our other not so obviously sustainable impact at the very beginning, but now very clearly technology-based startup now also have sustainability at the front of their minds, not back of their minds. Some of the latest investments that we are making but have not announced, and we'll leave it to them to do so, are in the mobility space, clean energy space, and consumable space. I think to answer the question from the audience about our multiplier effect maybe will be for new startups or growth level companies that are really looking to get seed funding or funding from us to scale their work. The question that we really want to ask, and you have to ask yourself as founders seeking funding, is that are you solving a huge problem? And this huge problem requires significant capital plus technology. I'm a firm believer in that technology plus capital will present the multiplier effect. Otherwise, it is going to be tough to scale or to replicate that solution outside of wherever that the startup is in. And if they have all those, they tick all the boxes, and we welcome a conversation with them, because we understand that every sector have not just sector-specific matrix and so on, but have very clearly different solutions or approaches to them. And even in the country that they are in, have very clearly different regulatory considerations or political considerations to helping them solve it. So it's hard for me to just put one, just say, okay, if you're in this space, you should be doing this. every country is different. And as you pointed out already right at the very beginning, ASEAN is a very, whole mix of very different countries.
No, fair point, James. I guess just on that note, right? So I guess one thing you said is about understanding like how big is the scale of the problem you're solving, right? So that's one big thing that you would look at. Could you share anything else within the matrix? So I guess one is the size of the problem, maybe the approach or the technology that they're using to solve it. Any key things else that you look at when you that attracts you to a good and upcoming startup?
Okay, so besides the usual guidance that we put on any startup, whether they are tech focused or impact driven or anything like that, those would be the usual ones. Like we look at the team, we look at the problem that they're solving, we look at how scalable the technology is, and so everything that you mentioned above. In addition to all those fun for impact, and then we want to very clearly measure. We have a very clear definition of impact, and therefore very clear measurement tools and frameworks that we use to measure, and then we manage along the way, and then report the social and environmental performance of these portfolio companies. And then on top of that, proprietary sector-specific matrix enhances this tracking and reporting. Ultimately, the goal is that just because you're solving important environmental problem doesn't mean that what you're doing is capital efficient. So we want to make sure that when you raise the next round, or when we put you forward to institutional funds such as the World Bank and so on, that they can clearly see that not only is what you're solving meaningful, that you have been efficient in using the capital to solve what they think should be measured also.
Okay, that's very interesting, right? It's not just efficiency, yeah, it's from the whole larger perspective, because again, finance is a scarce resource. So how do we maximize that to solve our problems in the quickest, most efficient manner? Just going to stick with you, James, for a little bit, and just thinking out big over here, right? In your ecosystem view of the different companies to invest, has there been any interesting technological trends that you have observed that is coming up? We know renewables were quite big last couple of years, but any new trends that you're observing that VCs are moving towards?
I think the renewables one is the biggest elephant in the room already. So as you pointed out earlier, also the costs have reduced very significantly, more than 80% in sectors like solar, for example. In our region here, we don't see much experimentation with other tools such as wind and so on, but the big ones as solar is something that we track very closely. In addition to that, we are also seeing impact companies also very clearly now interested in other developments or developments happening in other space. For example, impact companies now coming and saying that, what we are doing can potentially be tokenized. So you're seeing this intermix of different trends that are happening, and just because someone is doing impact, it doesn't mean that they are not tech savvy. We have seen so many tech savvy impact founders, and to me, that's a very interesting, very exciting development compared to just a few years ago, when most of them were really just guys who want to do good, and that's nice. But now all of them are coming with a very tech savvy view.
Oh, thank you, James. That's such an interesting thing that you point out. It was a very similar sentiment I got as well when I was in Malaysia at Magic, which was, like an agency that's leading startups and social enterprises. And in the beginning, I remember a clear divide between the tech startups and the social enterprises. You could see very different molds, very different kind of people. But now we've seen, whenever I go to the events, it's very merged, and you see a lot of convergence between the two groups. So let's jump back to you, Mimi, on this. And, I believe in the audience, we also do have a lot of people who are looking about how could they go about to start their own impact-driven enterprise or a business or an NGO that will go into tackling very pressing social needs. And I think we all can be honest here that it is not easy. So what are some of the advices you would give and some of the things to avoid when you're starting an impact-driven enterprise?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's really important to stay focused on your overarching vision, which, we're talking about environmental sustainability. There are a lot of recyclers out there who don't have that core vision of being impact driven, and they make choices that reflect that. But being impact driven, you really stand out as a global leader and a visionary, and you can really help to drive global policy and action. James alluded to that when he said, when they're looking at two different companies that are very similar, they're going to go with the one that is going to have more impact. And that, they're looking for companies that are are really addressing really large scale problems. Sometimes, as you said, Rashvin, it is not easy to start a company, and definitely times do get tough. But if you continue to keep that overarching vision and make sure all your decisions are made to drive that vision, you will be able to really succeed and stay focused. At the same time, what we're doing isn't philanthropy work, it isn't charity work. It's really important to achieve financial sustainability so that you can continue on the very important critical work that's needed. And I think Henry may have some comments as well about that.
Yeah, I'll just add, sure. Really important thing that from my perspective, that it's good to focus on. That is, particularly in our industry, and that is volumes. And so without volumes, you're not achieving both your sustainable goals and your commercial goals. And so what does that mean? Invest in a good team and invest in equipment that doesn't break down. So I think it's quite easy to fall in the trap as a startup to perhaps save on some of those costs, both in your team and your equipment. So these are some of the lessons that we've learned over the time, and it's good to pass that on.
Oh, thank you, Henry. One of the best advice I was given about this, and I wish I'd got it sooner, was, Rash, you should fall in love with your impact or your mission, but not your product, right? Because you might have to change the product that you're working on, or maybe even the approach, but your long-term goal of what you want to achieve has to stay consistent. Do you guys want to jump in with anything on that? If you've experienced, where you've seen how founders or teams, or even yourself, where you've had to change your approach, but you still maintain the same North Star?
Yeah, I mean, in our industry, it's very easy to chase short-term profits and different products based on commodity price fluctuations and things like that. So again, I think it's really important to stay true to, as Mimi said, the reason that you started the business and your overriding goals, and stay consistent with that, and then focus on the volume. So don't try and sidestep and chase short-term profits when you should be thinking long term.
How about you, James? Maybe you want to jump in this about startups having to, or even impact enterprises having that North Star and looking at how you could change your product, but still maintaining that same impact driven mission.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So when you pointed out things will change, regulations will change, but your North Star, stays your North Star. You shouldn't change it that much. Mimi and Henry brought up something on the financial stability, sustainability. That is very important to us. Obviously, not just as an investee or investment fund investing into some startup. It's not just that. It's if we always tell the startups that, look, what you're doing is important, not just for yourself, not just for us, but for the environment, right? Or for the world, or for the sector that you're trying to cover. But if you run out of cash and you have to remove your staff, shut down a company, then the sector is never going to get changed by you. So you got to make sure that you're surviving, right? And someone has to pay whatever they need to pay, hopefully market rates, market acceptable rates, and so on. And you have to charge that in order to stay alive. Otherwise, you're not going to have an impact at all.
Yeah.
Well, James, it's so important you mentioned that, right? Because in some of the part of when I've got to mentor some of the newer impact-driven enterprises, and I've realized that there tends to be, sometimes there's this fear with profit being seen as a bad thing, or profit being seen as something to be a bit wary of, because they're I guess it's a bit of an identity crisis, when you're looking to solve an impact mission, but then you also need to absolutely realize that you need to scale and grow and pay your people well. Have you given any good advice to people on how do they balance this dichotomy of impact and making sure it's profitable the whole time?
I'll tell these people to come and attend talks like this and talk to us because they are co-investors and so on who are not so familiar. So we ask them, we are happy to take meetings with them just to let them explain to them that these guys are important, but it's pointless if they can't even survive. They get it.
I think, can I just also mention,
Yes.
I actually come from a development background, so I've always worked in global public health and public policy. So profit is kind of a dirty word, as you said, and you kind of feel like a sellout maybe, but it's so important to have profitability and sustainability in your business, because without it, like James said, you won't be able to continue on that mission. So it might mean that we're recycling maybe, we're recycling stuff out of landfill, but we're also trying to build up a supply network that for raw material that comes before the landfill, it's closer to the first waste generator. So it's a lot cleaner. It's easier to manage. It's, a product that is maybe a bit more in demand and it has a higher profitability. But without having that kind of cleaner product, we wouldn't be able to continue on making changes with the very end of life product. And so I think that, profitability shouldn't be seen as something to shy away from or to, it's so necessary, as James said, to continue on with that North Star mission. Yeah. And I think that there aren't enough people, actually, like I said, there are a lot of recyclers in our industry who don't have that vision. And it's so important to recognize that there are a few of us who really want to be global leaders and global sustainability leaders, and to support that and to support that within our own organizations too, and keep that going.
Oh, thank you, Mimi. Just adding to this, right? One of the things I've noted is there's also a lack of good financial talent, within like the impact enterprise space. And I'm quite happy to see that when it merges with the tech space, we're seeing a lot of like VC talent overflow into this side as well. And, guiding like new startups about, hey, look, you need to look at a 5-year, 10-year plan, and you need to be, how do you take this beyond? So there's a question onto this, James, that maybe I think you could probably answer this, which is, what is the best way forward to successfully merge tech and sustainable practices?
Wow. Okay.
Quite a big one, I know.
Yeah, I think we should always be able to keep an open mind, and just when the startups, when they come, we try our best to inculcate to them the importance of technology, which can help them scale, and of course capital itself. And the technology part really was difficult to get across a few years ago. But right now, I mean, even events like this, it's easier for us to now see that more people now understand that cross-sector fertilization is good. And like I said earlier, some of them are coming around with very esoteric ideas on how they can get funding or get some product done with tokenization, for example. So I'm just very excited about this new batch of founders that we are seeing. And for the older batch, I think, I think if they haven't already moved to the side, I think those who are still surviving probably have already found sustainable ways to survive. Then my question is, can they have a very big uplift if they were to choose to absorb ideas from other sectors? And my gut feel is that they will. They just have to be open-minded about it.
Oh, James, thank you. So team, I think we're coming close to the end. We've got a bit less than 2 minutes, and it's been quite nice. We've got good questions from the audience. So before we wrap up, maybe I guess Henry, you could just share with us, what could we be looking forward to from Myanmar Recycle over the next couple of years? And then James, you could answer the same question as well, sort of like parting words to our participants.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to putting together a national collection network that incorporates technology and gets rid of some of the inefficiencies that are in the market here. So that's going to be the biggest challenge for us, and a lot of work going forward. But it goes hand in hand with what we want to do, which is expand our volumes and expand the companies. So for us, that's we'll be adopting practices that may be in other countries, maybe not. But certainly in Myanmar, we're really looking forward to progressing that and getting rid of some of the inefficiencies in the market.
Oh man, I wish you all the best with the national plan. It's super needed, and let us know how we could help.
Absolutely.
James, oh man, for sure, buddy. James, over to you.
Okay. The question was on what do we see in the
Quest Ventures
towards, what do we see as we head towards 2030, for example.
Exactly.
So as we head towards that goal and beyond, actually, the key guidance that we have is begin with the end in mind. Sustainability is an important topic, and so are the funds that are placing their bets in these new ideas. Long-term issues really require long-term solutions. Quest Ventures, we are really committed to sustainability, not just for now, but for the future.
Okay, team, I guess we are proper on time. We've got a few seconds left. And you know what? Honestly, thank you, Mimi. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, James, and all the audiences who asked questions. It's been a lovely session. Thank you very much. Take care and be well.
Rashvin.